I want to start with last night's football game, which I was inaccurate in my selection of the New Orleans Saints winning the game. My logic behind the New Orleans Saints winning the game isn't because I think the New Orleans Saints are any good. I don't. Andy Dalton's their starting quarterback. The defense hasn't been the same, even though Dennis Allen was the architect of that defense last year. And obviously the offense has left a lot to be desired. It does feel like at some point Alvin Kamara is going to be suspended for a long time. Michael Thomas, stop me if you heard this before, is hurt yet again. Like all of these things. The Saints aren't good. But I saw who Baltimore was bringing in with Lamar Jackson on offense, and I was like, man, you got running backs down, receivers down, Mark Andrews down, your favorite option, your number one wide receiver, your number one pass-catching target, and your number one running back all out didn't look good. And yet they found a way. Right? They found a way. And I think part of the genius to that offense, the genius to how Baltimore plays is that not just running back, right? Not just running back, quarterback. It's in a short period of time. It's not crazy hard to replace. And you're like, wait, so you're saying that because last year his backup came in that you should replace Lamar Jackson? It's not what I said. It's not what I said. What I said is for a short period of time, it's easier to get somebody to come in and run essentially a college offense and run the football 40 times last night, shorten the game, and play to your defense, which is improved with the additions recently. Most notably, Roquan Smith was awesome last night, not surprisingly, in the 3-4. He's awesome. But the same reason Roquan Smith was traded is the same reason that I'm blown away by the things that people say about Lamar Jackson. Yes, he completed 12 passes to 10 different receivers because none of them are particularly good, right? They just aren't. I mean, hell, I didn't know Deshaun Jackson was back with the Ravens. I had forgotten. Did you guys remember that? Kenyon Drake ends up running for 93. Lamar Jackson runs for 82. They combined for 35 rushing attempts, and they win the game. And, Andy Dalton turns it over once. They can't run the football at all, right? I think it's 3.2 yards a carry, only run it 15 times. It was a time of possession disaster for the New Orleans Saints, and the Ravens were the far better team. Ravens held the ball 37 minutes, 47 seconds. The Saints had the ball 22 minutes, 13 seconds. Classic. Run the football, keep the chains moving, keep your defense out the field, and then you can unleash your pass rush on Andy Dalton because they can't run the football. And they won. But you'll hear people say, like, you need to pay Lamar Jackson. Why hasn't Baltimore pay him? Why do we omit the truth just because we want to win some sort of stupid argument? Why do we do that? Because the idea of paying him would lead you to believe, like you didn't know anything about the situation. And you had people go on radio and TV today and say, you need to pay Lamar Jackson. Okay, first of all, everyone who plays in the NFL is getting paid. That's why they're called professional athletes. The Baltimore Ravens want to keep Lamar Jackson. They don't want to trade him. They don't want to lose him in free agency. And they're not going to. You know why? Because he's not actually a free agent. Well, his contract expires this year. Yeah, not really. There's the franchise tag and there's another franchise tag. And if they want to, there's a transitional tag in year 3. It would cost them a lot of money. But the fact is that if they don't want him to leave, he's not going anywhere for the next 3 years at least. At least. So this thing of you need to pay him, well, he was reported over $200 million in guarantees. What I want to hear from people who say you have to pay him is, do you want to pay him more than Deshaun Watson? If you're there, hey, God bless you. Nobody in the NFL is there. They're not. They all think that contract is bad, is a joke, is one that is a bad look for the NFL. And some of it, in all honesty, is because Deshaun's coming off of the suspension. Some of it, though, is because Deshaun Watson signed a big guaranteed contract in Houston and then only months later decided, I want out, collected the first 3 years, and never played it down on a contract in Houston. Didn't play it down. But it's more the idea of 5 years guaranteed for a guy who runs. Like, he's not he's not a running quarterback. Okay. Running quarterback in the NFL, and last night was the first night of college basketball, is the term mid-major to college basketball, which is most people either don't know what it means or just simply want to avoid the reality of the truth of what it means. Mid-major is not a bad word, and being a running quarterback is not a bad word. He's the greatest thrower. He's the greatest combination runner-thrower in the history of the NFL. He's not the scrambler passer of Steve Young, but in terms of pure running, who can also throw, that's Lamar Jackson. And you're like, no, man, he dominated last night. Like, come on, man. He had 133 yards passing. And in fairness to him, he didn't have his full wide receiving core. In fairness to the Ravens, I've heard people say they don't invest in wide receivers. That's funny. They've drafted 2 first-round draft picks at wide receiver since he's been there. The year he was drafted, they drafted a first-round draft pick at tight end. Mark Andrews is actually, I believe, the second highest paid tight end. He was the highest paid tight end coming into the season. Travis Kelce gets a new deal. He's the second highest paid tight end. They have a ton of money locked up in the offensive line. So there's a lot of money that has been spent around Lamar Jackson. J.K. Dobbins is a second-round pick, right? So they've given up first-round picks for wide receivers and a tight end, second-round pick for a running back. And they haven't invested in it? No, they haven't gone out and gotten free agents. One, because the team doesn't believe in it. The team doesn't believe in high-priced wide receiver free agents. They draft their wide receivers, generally. And do a good job of drafting them. And secondly, why do you need to? I mean, look at the wide receivers who have signed as free agents, and it's hit or miss. And, oh yeah, by the way, wide receivers aren't exactly thrilled with how he throws the football sometimes. Everybody loves Lamar Jackson, the dude. Great dude. But you don't hear wide receiver going, you know where I want to go? I want to go to Baltimore, where they run the football 3/4 of the time. It's effective. It works. It's just hard to recruit anybody to come as a free agent, rightfully so. And honestly, they don't want to pay that much money because they want to win based upon running the football, playing great defense. And then every once in a while, Lamar has an explosive play because the guy throws the ball downfield really well. But I've heard on like 6 different shows today, like, man, they really need to pay Lamar Jackson. They never said they weren't going to pay Lamar Jackson. This is exhausting. You are all exhausting because what you will do, and I'm so glad today is election day, which means we get to stop hearing all these nonsensical commercials. I'll give you one. There was something done in California. I don't know if you guys know this one, Ramos and Jason Stewart, where recently the governor moved, and this is how it was reported by some. The governor moved to change whether or not someone would automatically be labeled a sex offender if they were caught having relations with somebody who's underage, if the span of years is 10 or less. Okay? So this is a real thing in politics, where if you are, if it's a same-sex crime, the governor of California has pushed to change whether or not you're labeled as a sex offender if the span of years is 10 years. It's at the discretion of the judge. And when you hear that, you're like, what? What are we even possibly talking about? How could you possibly do that, right? Then you actually read further, read all the details, and the discretion of the judge is actually the same if it's a heterosexual act. You're like, oh. So the idea is like, look, if you're not automatically labeled with something that I think all of us actually agree, like I would actually have done the opposite, which is if that happens between somebody who's less than 10 years, but you're 23 and they're 16, it should be an automatic. I guess I don't because it's nuance. But the fact is, we're just trying to even out the laws, right? That's the idea behind it. Let's just even out so hetero, homosexual, doesn't matter. Crime against somebody younger at the discretion of the judge. I like the automatic, but okay, discretion of the judge. I would say any judge is going to rule in the exact same way. But what happens is we omit half of it. That's who we've become. We're disgraceful. And it's obviously different. Crimes against children. I'm a human being plus a father. I'm equally sensitive. So when I heard it, I was like, what? This is crazy. How could you do that? Then I read further and I was like, oh, okay. Well, I don't like the previous rule. I wish they both change. Or they both change back to the, right? We do the same thing in sports now. I've heard people on 6 different shows, television and radio, say, the Ravens really need to think about, they need to pay Lamar. They offered to pay Lamar more money they'd ever paid anyone ever. More money than everybody in the NFL outside of one player, Deshaun Watson, because that's a terrible contract. And I've been the one telling you guys for 6-7 months, like, look, I actually think Lamar has an argument. He has an argument. The argument is, I've never been hurt like Deshaun tore his ACL. I don't have any of these off the field issues like he has. I've won an MVP. Deshaun hasn't won an MVP. Like normally, you get $1 more than the guy before you. The difference is that there's like 5 quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers included, Russell Wilson included, Derek Carr included, Kyler Murray included, that have gotten new contracts after Deshaun Watson got his contract, and they're not the same as that. It's, by anyone's definition, of an outlier. Anyway, the Ravens, it's all been reported that before the season, they offered more money guaranteed in the first 3 years than anybody else is getting. In line with how it generally is done. They just weren't willing to go to what Cleveland's doing. Because everybody thinks Cleveland's contract is a joke. It's a bad look. Not just because what Deshaun Watson is coming off with all these allegations and the suits that are settled, but because 5 years guaranteed money in the NFL, which is a violent sport where one hit can end your career, is stupid. So we're not doing it. It doesn't mean they don't want to pay him. It doesn't mean they don't want to pay him more money than they've ever paid anybody. It doesn't mean they don't want, and oh yeah, by the way, while he's not technically under contract, he's actually under contract for up to at least 3 more years. So what's mind-numbing about last night's win is not that the Ravens found a way. That's what good teams do. That's what good quarterbacks do. That's what good franchises do. Just find a way to win a game on a Monday night when you got half your roster and you're on the road against a team that, I don't know, maybe for half the game thought, maybe we got a chance. And they played great complementary football. Run the ball, stop the run. Make Andy Dalton beat us. He can't beat you. He doesn't have the weapons, and he's not good enough. That's not a good enough football team. That's a good win. But we have to stop with this insane argument of, well, now the Ravens need to pay him. They want to pay him. They just don't want to match the Deshaun Watson contract. I think that's actually reasonable. But for whatever reason, we have become a society of people that choose to omit things to further our argument in the same way that politicians omit things. And we got to stop. Maybe today is the last day we can omit things, and then tomorrow we come back to our senses because the midterm elections are over, and we can stop BSing people into believing only half of the story.